The Cold War never ended. America and our allies thought the war was won, but elements inside Russia never stopped their confrontation against liberal democracies, and in particular the USA. For decades, this conflict continued behind the scenes, only rarely noticed by the public. With the 2016 election of Trump, this war and its tactics are too obvious to ignore. This is the first episode in a series that will shed light on this ongoing conflict that threatens the continued existence of the democratic world and a free America. In the 80s, Americans were not fans of the Soviet Union. Russia was known for over-the-top military parades and the sinister-looking old men who ran things there. Russians were hilariously backward. They didn't have our awesome movies, didn't eat at McDonald's or ride a BMX. We knew they wanted to destroy our country and freedom everywhere, and it was our duty to stop them. Of course, America would win eventually. It was up to us to save the world. In the early 90s, the evil empire suddenly disappeared. America's inevitable victory became real, and the Soviet Union was no more. In American minds, Russia was transformed from an arch-enemy into a well-meaning but hopelessly behind backwater, forever trying to catch up to the West. A Japanese steel executive visiting Russia at the time summed up the mood best. When asked how far behind Russian steel production was, he answered, "You are forever behind." With the Soviets dealt with, Americans were free to reap the fruits of victory and shift our focus to more interesting things, like the stock market, making the Middle East go from bad to worse, and the rapidly expanding internet. When communism fell, many former Soviet satellites disbanded their secret police and undertook a process of national reconciliation. Russia did not undergo a similar process. Instead, the Russian intelligence services, formerly known as the KGB, now reorganized and renamed, soon resumed their activities at home and abroad, this time without a clear ideology, save for accumulating power. Once political and military control had been fully secured by Yeltsin and stability established, Russian intelligence leadership began a long process of rebuilding the empire, but this time under the radar. By the late 90s, Yeltsin's shortcomings became obvious, and a plan was hatched to replace him with one of the Russian intelligence's own. The plan was called Operation Successor and was executed in the fall of 1999 when a cell within Russian intelligence bombed several Russian apartment buildings, killing nearly 300 and injuring more than 1,000. These terrorist attacks were blamed on Chechen separatists and provided an excuse to restart the brutal war in Chechnya. The Prime Minister at the time, and former Russian intelligence colonel Vladimir Putin, was celebrated for his tough approach and successful execution of the war. As a result, Putin became very popular with the public and was viewed as the man to cure the many problems ailing Russia. With Putin in command, Russian intelligence methods such as Kompromat, formerly used for Soviet political goals, were repurposed to eliminate Putin's enemies and keep his friends loyal. Russian intelligence partnered with the Russian mob to fleece the public and spread Putin's influence around the globe. Mobsters and Russian intelligence figures were given key positions in the government and business and were allowed to accumulate vast wealth. This combination of Russian intelligence and the mob, all serving Putin, became known as Russia Inc. The tacit understanding was that the powers of the Russian state would support members of this group so long as they remained loyal to Putin. Defectors to this agreement risked bankruptcy, imprisonment, and death. Over the next 20 years, Russia Inc. developed a stranglehold on Russian society and led to corruption on a massive scale, robbing the Russian people of their wealth and potential. Overseas, Russian intelligence and the Russian mob became almost indistinguishable and developed a significant presence in the UK, Hungary, Israel, and the American East Coast. Financial institutions grew dependent on the massive outflows of money leaving Russia and the proceeds from laundering the mob's money. The number of legal and illegal Russian intelligence agents expanded worldwide, and industrial-scale blackmailing began in earnest, targeting the rich and powerful everywhere. Today, elements of the new Cold War are in the news on a regular basis. Putin is attempting to rebuild the Soviet Empire, but Russia is far behind America militarily, so war must be waged asymmetrically. Putin's goal is to attack in ways that fall short of provoking a full-scale military response. In Eastern Europe and the Middle East, kinetic war is waged through the use of deniable assets, such as contract fighters and jihadis. In the West, information war is carried out using propaganda, fake opposition, and provocation. In 2008, Russia broke the decades-long European peace by invading Georgia. The war began with cyber attacks against infrastructure, disinformation to confuse and demoralize Georgians, and the use of irregular forces that provided Russia with deniability. In 2014, Russia again used these methods in its invasion of Ukraine and annexation of the Crimean Peninsula. A new stage in the war began in 2015 when Russia targeted a series of elections using the release of hacked emails, micro-targeted fake news, bots and trolls to amplify messages, and local politicians who answer to Putin. Successful election interference occurred in the Philippines, Brexit in the UK, and the United States presidential election. Unsuccessful attempts were made in Catalonia, France, Germany, Sweden, and Ireland. In 2018, the American public is becoming increasingly aware that we are under attack by the Russians. But much confusion remains due to the multifaceted nature of the attacks and the successful attempts at disinformation meant to distract. In short, Putin knows that the only way for him to win the war is if Americans are confused as to what is really going on. 2018 will be a crucial year with the U.S. midterms occurring and the prospect of Democratic majorities that would likely impeach the Russian puppets sitting in the White House. Americans can expect the Russians will do everything possible to prevent this from happening. Expect new techniques to be used as well as familiar ones, such as damaging email leaks, scare campaigns targeting conservatives, and propaganda meant to demoralize liberals. When and if the GOP seems like a lost cause, expect Russians to retool their plan and attempt to sway the election towards Democratic leaders of their choice. Americans are in a new Cold War with Russia. Thanks to our military superiority and the spread of social media, Russia has chosen to wage war against us primarily using information. In this information war, all citizens are combatants and must educate themselves to the threat. Make no mistake, the continued existence of a free America is at stake. We remain hopeful that due to the brazenness of these attacks, Americans will have no choice but to recognize the threat and fix the flaws in our systems that make us vulnerable, and as a result, create a more just country for all. America lost the first battle in the new Cold War. To win the war, Americans must refuse to lose trust in our institutions and in one another. Our enemy wants to divide and conquer us. Do not let them. Join us in defending America.